Today's story was written by Reddit user IAmTheHypeTFS. There's no one left who remembers what it was like when humanity joined our ranks. There are videos and reports and textbooks on it, of course, but there's no one left who was there, and so we forgot. We watched as humanity grew old and peaceful, settling into a comfortable place of power and influence among the great races of the Union, and so we grew resentful. What had they done to deserve their status? What had they done to earn their place? How had this upstart race become so widespread in our galaxy? We were the ones who built this community. We were the ones who had created the Union. Our race had been out here long before them. Our people had greater lifespans, learned more, deserved more. And so we struck first. We prepared in secret, gathered our forces, conspired with allies, and attacked this old, feeble humanity. How we pitied and hated them, such a young race, but in our eyes, already seemingly so old and withered, pathetic. It was time to put the old man down. We struck the settlements and colonies bordering our territories, burning out this human infestation from our planets. And gods, how we revelled in the fear and destruction we spread as we flew back to our homeworlds, anticipating the response of outrage and declaration of war so we could have a proper conflict. No, a proper beating. If attacking them was our greatest error, then waiting for their response was the second worst thing we could have done, because they didn't reply. They didn't send any messages. They didn't declare war. They simply acted. Within a week, countless war vessels hovered over our worlds. There were older models among the ranks, some even that appeared in the textbooks we had so easily glossed over when thinking about how undeserving humanity was. But most were brand new, top of the line, and armed to the teeth with the latest weapons. There were energy readings we couldn't even understand, let alone analyze. But instead of attacking, they just sat there silently, and oddly, the older models seemed to have been placed in front as first line of defense. They ignored all attempts to make contact and aimed every single gun they had at any vessel that got too close. In the face of overwhelming force, we could do nothing. We felt ashamed. Not because we thought we were in the wrong, but because we had underestimated them. We thought that they had stopped their pursuit of war during these centuries of peace, but clearly we were mistaken. But if they were just going to sit and posture, then we would have more than enough time to muster the might of our allied forces. After all, if they truly wanted this fight, they would have started firing by now, and they certainly wouldn't have these antique ships in their front lines. If they had to bring these relics out of retirement, this must be the extent of their resources, and while we might be overwhelmed in the beginning, we had more force to bring to bear down in a drawn-out conflict. But something nagged at us about those old ships. Something seemed familiar. They reminded us of something, but we couldn't quite put our fingers on it. They felt like copies of something we used to know, and imperfect ones at that. Something just different enough for us to be unable to grasp the connection and leave us increasingly unsettled. We finally turned our attention back to the reports, the videos, the textbooks, anything we could try to finally scratch this seemingly insignificant but inexplicably persistent itch, and that's where we found it. Not the ships, but Sylaxians. Sylaxians were a race that had grown and flourished with us in the early days of the Union, before the subjugation of unascended wasn't yet seen as uncivilized or improper, and before the Union became a nurturing community rather than a gathering of conquerors. At no point in time were we more suited for war. At no point since did we revel in it so. None of us more than the Sylaxians. But the Sylaxians had a moniker these days. In fact, they'd had it for centuries now. It was just that they were so far removed from our thoughts that it slipped through our collective memory. As the humans say, out of sight, out of mind. The lost civilization. During a conquest, they had run into unexpected resistance and resorted to unseemly methods, even by the standards of the day, and it cost them dearly. The enemy they made that day had not relented until their homeworld had been cracked into pieces, and not a single settlement in the known galaxy remained. Perhaps there were still a handful of survivors out there, but they dared not show their faces lest they rekindle their old enemy's rage. It was their ships those relics reminded us of. It was those familiar curves and edges that evoked such a restless unease within us. And it was now the memory of the dead race whose designs they were based off of that made us shudder with fear. Because humanity hadn't been equals with the Salaxians when they chased them across the galaxy to their deaths, they hadn't had the technology required to crack their homeworld and track down every last Salaxian settlement. All they had was hate-fueled determination. They had cobbled together these counterfeit copy ships and sent them out by the hundreds to overwhelm quality with quantity, until the Salaxians' resources were exhausted and they had no choice but to run with humanity clawing at their backs. And even then, they ultimately couldn't escape. They had hurled, captured and wrecked Salaxian warships at their homeworld, whose coordinates had been pried from tortured lips, until the planet simply couldn't sustain any more impacts and cracked apart. They had sent a ludicrous number of vessels out with maps of the galaxy obtained from their defeated foes to check every possible corner and burn out their remaining existences until finally there was no one left to find that could be found. And our predecessors had watched all this happen, wanting to help even as the Salaxians begged them not to, shaken to their core. The most battle-hungry among them begged them not to fight. The ones that loved war the most ran from their enemy. A conqueror of conquerors died to its prey. When it was all said and done and humanity made first contact with the rest of the Union, extending a hand drenched in the blood of an entire civilization, they shook it. They accepted their offer of alliance out of sheer fear, waiting to see if and when it would be their turn to fall. And then they watched as this monster put down its hammer of war and picked up a pen to write laws of peace and treaties of friendship. And the ones who came before us welcomed this era of peace, eager to keep thoughts of conflict far from the minds of humanity, especially with how quickly they were developing and how much closer to being true equals with the other races they were getting. But they are gone, and we forgot. We may have remembered now, but is it too late? Are those old ships meant as a reminder of the past, or are they warning of things to come? Has the passage of time and an era of peace softened the heart of the old man, or will the hammer swing once more? We send our offers of reparations, the list of aid, money and territory growing with each day that passes. We hold our breaths and pray that humanity will be merciful, that we haven't taken a step too far that would doom us to join the Salaxians as lost civilizations. Finally, after over a week, we send out our latest offer, and there is movement from the human fleets over all worlds. The ships move forward and we fear the worst, only for them to turn around and slowly leave their respective orbits and return to the newly expanded human space. We gasp for air as we stop holding our breaths. We collapse into the arms of our loved ones and weep in fear and relief in equal measure. We promise to make this day an officially recognized holiday throughout the galaxy to commemorate humanity's mercy. We all but lose ourselves to the ecstasy of avoiding certain annihilation, and we vow to never forget, lest the old man pick up his hammer once again.